We face a global environmental challenge, and that's the challenge of anthropogenic climate change. As an island nation, we're literally on the front line of one of the principal effects of climate change, namely rising sea levels around the world. In our daily lives, we rely upon the rule of law to structure many aspects of our existence, from our contracts with our employers, to the goods and services we purchase, to the personal injuries or property damages we sustain on the road. The same principle applies to our response to international ecological challenges. So our climate policy flows from a developing global consensus concerning the environment. And that can be summed up in this: mankind is not the environment's master, but its steward. And we are responsible for the environmental welfare of future generations and for other creatures and the earth generally. And this policy informs the court's adjudicative role. Our role is limited to the adjudication of rights and obligations based on the content of the law and not a judge's own personal leanings or policy preferences. The environmental rule of law operates by the consistent and logical application of laws meant to safeguard the environment, with a clear appreciation of the environmental purpose behind them. I now turn to conservation and biodiversity. Singapore has enacted the Endangered Species Import and Export Act 2006 to give effect to CITES. The purpose behind CITES, and by extension the ESA 2006, is to regulate the trade and movement of endangered species in order to safeguard their long-term protection. I end on living with nature, what it means for human beings to live in harmony with nature and to work towards a world of better coexistence between humans and animals. The onus is not just on urban city planners, but also on everyone to work together as a community to nurture and cultivate our green spaces without compromising human safety and well-being. It is an urgent issue for the whole community. And I look forward to continuing this conversation this afternoon and beyond.
Climate litigation has basically seen a significant growth, particularly from 2015. And in a recent report by the Asian Development Bank, when we talk about climate litigation, we're not just talking about litigation where climate change issues are at the core or at the center of the lawsuit. It also includes lawsuits where climate change is one of a number of issues being addressed by the litigants. For example, the importance of environmental impact assessments and also the rights of indigenous peoples.
We are the research arm of the Met Services Singapore. What's the impetus for the research that we do here? Is really to provide new and better forecasting capabilities to address the impacts of not just climate change but the weather as well.
We are already seeing increased temperatures in Singapore and more extreme rainfall. There is also an increasingly heated global competition to secure resources worldwide. Singapore does not have access to our own natural resources, and we are vulnerable to external shocks, as we saw during COVID-19. While we are dealing with these challenges, we have to remain competitive economically as well. If we do not have a strong economic backstop, we will not be able to afford solutions to deal with our challenges.
Singapore has committed under the Paris Agreement to reach net zero by 2050, and this will require a mix of instruments and policies to do so. So there's a lot of work to have to be done in terms of mitigation, looking at our energy mix and looking at how we build our ability to absorb carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases.
I think it's at the individual and the collective actions that you have to undertake. Some of these climate impacts are already locked in. Yeah, so at the individual level, you can reduce your emissions.
For many people, when we talk about forever chemicals, I think we are looking at things like your persistent organic pollutants, which are controlled under the Stockholm Convention. And this includes things like your DDT, which I mentioned earlier, which are very, very persistent in the environment and have been shown to be very harmful. So for chemicals such as these, which have demonstrated harm, we take a very serious stance, and all these such chemicals have been banned for use locally.
How does environmental rule of law fit into understandings of rule of law generally?
First of all, the environmental rule of law is part of the rule of law, and one of the themes of my address earlier was to try and draw some correspondences between them. And I think that in addition to that, there are probably a couple of points I'd like to make. One is, I mentioned how there is this shift in mindset, philosophy, culture from, mastery to stewardship, and from being the one important species to being one part of of the broader ecosystem. And I think the last point there is about adding urgency.